Welcome to day 29 of the 100 Days of Faith Challenge. I'm so glad you're here. If you've ever wondered whether God has forgotten you, this is for you. There are certain moments in life that make you ask questions you never thought you'd voice out loud. Moments when the delay drags on so long, it feels like heaven forgot to answer. Moments when everyone else seems to be moving forward while you feel stuck in the same prayers, the same struggles, the same silence. Moments when you sit alone in your room and whisper, "God, did you forget about me?" It's a heartbreaking question, and yet it's one so many of us ask, especially when life feels unbearably quiet. Today's verse is God's answer, not just in poetic form but in a deeply personal promise. He says, "Can a mother forget her baby?" It's an image that pulls at the core of human tenderness. A nursing mother and her infant, intimate, nurturing, connected. Even she may forget, God says, "But I will not forget you. You are engraved on my hands," not written in pencil, not scribbled on a sticky note, engraved, permanent, unerasable. Let that sink in for a moment. You may feel forgotten, but you're not. You may feel invisible, but you're not. You may feel like your story has been paused while others turn their pages, but God hasn't misplaced you. He hasn't overlooked you. You are not a file at the bottom of his inbox. You are engraved on his hands. Your name, your tears, your prayers, your longings, they are all seen, held in a place where God can't and won't ignore them. Still, I get it. Knowing that in theory is different than feeling it in real life. It's easy to believe God is with you when prayers are being answered, doors are flying open, and blessings are obvious. But when nothing's changing, when heaven feels quiet, when it's been months or even years of waiting, it's so easy to slip into that internal doubt. Maybe God moved on. Maybe I'm not important. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I'm too far gone. But here's what I want to remind you today. God's silence is not the same as God's absence. God's delay is not the same as his denial. And your current season is not a reflection of your worth. It's an unfolding. He has not forgotten. He is being intentional. Sometimes when it feels like nothing is happening on the outside, everything is happening on the inside. Roots are growing. Character is deepening. Prayers are being set in motion in unseen realms. And God is preparing both you and the blessing for the perfect collision in time. The problem is, we want God's promises in microwave timing. But God is the God of process, of seed, then root, then stalk, then bloom. He works in layers, and what he's doing in you often requires time, tenderness, and testing. When Joseph was sitting in prison after being falsely accused, it looked like God had forgotten him. Years passed. People walked away. Promises felt like distant dreams. But God hadn't forgotten. He was simply aligning everything for the right time, the right stage, and the right purpose. When Hannah wept in the temple for a child year after year, it felt like God wasn't listening. But her prayer didn't go unanswered. It went deep. And in time it produced Samuel, a prophet whose life would alter the course of Israel. And when Jesus hung on the cross, it looked like even the Father had turned his face. But 3 days later, the greatest redemption story in history was revealed. Just because it feels like nothing is happening, doesn't mean God is doing nothing. Sometimes what looks like a delay is actually divine choreography. Sometimes what feels like silence is actually sacred stillness. God working behind the scenes, in ways you wouldn't understand if he told you. So if you're in a season where you feel forgotten, unloved, or bypassed, don't judge God's presence by your current emotions. Judge it by his promise. And his promise is this: I will not forget you. I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. You are still on God's mind, still in his hands, still part of his plan. There's something deeply personal about being remembered. When someone remembers your birthday without needing a reminder, when they bring up something you told them months ago, when they check in during a hard season just to say, "I see you." That kind of remembering makes us feel valued, held, seen. Now imagine that on a divine level. God, the creator of galaxies and atoms, of oceans and eyelids, remembers you. Not casually, not once in a while. He carries your name in his very hands. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's truth. And yet we often struggle to believe it when life doesn't reflect it. Because when you're waiting for healing that hasn't come, when the relationship you've prayed for still hasn't appeared, when your finances feel like a desert, and your soul even drier, it's easy to think, if I were really seen by God, wouldn't things be different? But that's where faith has to go deeper than feelings. Because feelings lie. They change with the hour, with the weather, with our hormones and circumstances. But God's faithfulness, it doesn't shift. He is steady when you are weary. He is present when you feel abandoned. He is remembering you even when you forget yourself. Let's talk about timing. One of the hardest parts of faith is wrestling with the reality that God often moves slower than we want, but always right on time. And that tension between our timeline and His timing can feel unbearable. But ask yourself this. If God had answered every prayer you ever prayed exactly when you prayed it, would you have been ready? Would you have been ready? Would the blessing have lasted? Or would it have crushed you? See, God's delays are not passive. They're protective. They're a sign He's weaving something that's not just good, but sustainable. He's not just interested in getting you there fast. He's interested in getting you there whole. God is not in a rush to impress you with speed. He wants to transform you with substance. That's why He sometimes hides you, develops you in the dark, tucks you away where nobody can see you. Not because you're forgotten, but because you're being formed. And yes, I know it hurts. Waiting seasons can feel like being stuck in a room where the lights are off and the door is locked. But what if that room isn't a prison, but a womb? A space where something is being grown, protected, prepared. Think of a butterfly in its cocoon. The transformation is invisible, silent, slow, but it's necessary. If you try to cut the butterfly out too early, it won't fly. It will die. The struggle in the cocoon is what gives it the strength to soar. So too with you. Your waiting is not wasted. Your struggle is not unseen. And no matter how quiet it feels, you are not forgotten. Sometimes what looks like God's silence is actually His way of inviting you into deeper intimacy. He's not ignoring you. He's drawing you closer, not to test your worth, but to train your spirit. He wants to teach you how to listen beyond what your ears can hear, to trust beyond what your eyes can see, to walk even when the path is hidden, to believe even when the evidence is gone. That's the kind of faith that carries weight in heaven. So if you're feeling forgotten, ask yourself, what if I'm not forgotten? What if I'm being forged? What if this quiet season is actually a sacred setup for a louder glory? What if this delay is the exact divine buffer that's keeping you aligned with God's best? What if you're not overlooked, but overloved, and He's being extra gentle with your timing, because He values you that much? Beloved, don't let the enemy twist the silence into shame. Don't let him convince you that the stillness means rejection. And don't let unanswered prayers become proof that God has abandoned you. Instead, plant your heart in this truth. God remembers. God sees. God is working. Even now, sometimes the ache of waiting can feel louder than the whisper of God's promises. You wake up and everything looks the same. You go to bed, and the prayer you prayed the night before still feels unanswered. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and little by little, if you're not careful, the silence can harden into suspicion. Maybe He doesn't see me. Maybe He changed His mind. Maybe I'm not special after all. But friend, let me speak this directly into your heart today. God does not forget what He formed. He does not ignore what He died to redeem. He does not abandon those He calls His own. You are not another face in the crowd to God. You are His beloved, His child, His masterpiece. And even when it feels like nothing is moving, God is always working behind the scenes, arranging, aligning, refining, preparing. Sometimes He slows things down not because He's withholding, but because He's building something better than what you've been asking for. The issue is we measure God's love by how much we see, while God measures His love by how much He's doing, even when we don't see it. And let's be honest, we often want God to work on our timeline because we don't fully trust that He knows better. We panic when He's slow. We grow bitter when we don't understand. And we assume His not yet means not ever. But what if the very thing you think is a delay is actually His mercy? What if He's not answering that prayer yet because He sees a pitfall up ahead you don't know about? What if He's protecting you from rushing into a version of your future that would have derailed your destiny? What if He's allowing this pause because He wants you to know Him, not just His blessings? Because at the end of the day, God is far more interested in your relationship with Him than in simply handing you what you want. If God gave you everything you were praying for without preparing your heart for it, it wouldn't feel like a blessing. It would feel like a burden. That's why He waits. Not to hurt you, but to hold you back from something premature, to ensure you can carry the weight of what's coming. Let's take a moment to look back. How many things have you prayed for in the past that in hindsight, you now realize wouldn't have been good for you at all? How many no's or not yets actually saved you? How many times did you think you were being ignored, only to find out later that God was protecting you? You see, being forgotten means being dismissed, disregarded, irrelevant. But you are engraved. When God says, "See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands," He's not just making a sentimental statement. He's referencing the same hands that stretched out across the cross, the same hands that bled for you, the same hands that now intercede for you. That kind of remembrance isn't passive, it's passionate, it's eternal. You may not have the job yet. You may not be married yet. You may not have healing yet. You may not see the full picture yet. But God hasn't forgotten you. He is not pacing nervously, trying to figure out what to do with your life. He already knows. And in the meantime, He's holding every detail with precision. Every tear you've cried is stored. Every prayer you've whispered is remembered. Every quiet act of faith is recorded. You are not behind. You are not stuck. You are not invisible. You are in the exact place God is using to prepare you for what's ahead. Even when your emotions scream otherwise, hold on to the truth. Even when your heart feels weary, choose to remember who God is. And even when the evidence is missing, believe anyway. That's faith, and that's the kind of trust that God rewards. There's a sacred beauty in holding on when you don't feel held. When the skies are quiet but you pray anyway. When nothing's changing but you worship anyway. When your heart is aching but you still show up in faith. That kind of faith isn't weak, it's warrior-level trust. Because real faith doesn't just say, "God, I trust you," when it's easy. It says, "God, I trust you when I don't understand a single thing." And that's where you are right now, isn't it? Maybe you've waited so long for a breakthrough that you're afraid to even hope anymore. Maybe you've seen others receive what you're still praying for, and you've celebrated them outwardly but grieved silently. Maybe you've even reached the point where you've stopped asking altogether because it hurts too much to hope. If that's you, hear this with gentleness and truth. God's delay is not His disinterest, and His silence is not His forgetfulness. You are still His, and He is still working, even in what feels like the most barren parts of your life. Sometimes, the waiting doesn't just test our patience, it tests our identity. It makes us question our worth. It tempts us to believe that our value is tied to our visible progress, that if we're not being promoted, praised, or blessed, then we must be doing something wrong. But let me speak life into that lie. Your worth is not determined by what you receive from God. It's rooted in who you are to God. You are not forgotten because you haven't seen fruit yet. You are known, loved, and watched over, even when nothing around you feels like it. Think about David, anointed to be king, and then sent back to the field. He wasn't forgotten, he was being formed. God knew the palace would come, but first the pasture had to shape his character, had to teach him humility, patience, resilience. Or Ruth, who thought her story was over after her husband died, left in a foreign land with nothing, no plan, no title, no provision. And yet God was weaving redemption into every detail. Her losses didn't disqualify her, they positioned her for legacy. Or the woman with the issue of blood, 12 years of silence, of being overlooked, of being outcast. And then in one moment of faith, everything changed. Not because God suddenly remembered her, but because the appointed time had arrived. You see, God doesn't work on our clock. He works in His own rhythm, outside of time but deeply involved in every second of our lives. When you feel forgotten, God is often the most focused on you. When you feel discarded, He is most intentionally drawing you. And when you feel like your prayers are lost in the wind, He is catching every word like treasure. It's not about whether He remembers, it's about whether you'll believe He remembers, even when it doesn't look like it. That's what makes your faith so precious. Not that it's always strong, but that it chooses to believe again and again, even in the waiting. Today, instead of asking, "Why hasn't God answered yet?" try asking, "What is He strengthening in me while I wait?" Because while you're waiting for the door to open, God might be teaching you how to carry what's on the other side. While you're asking for a miracle, God might be maturing your mind to handle it with grace. While you're watching others move ahead, God might be protecting you from paths that would have hurt you in ways you couldn't yet see. You are not forgotten. You are being refined. You are being positioned, and your name, it's still engraved on the palms of his hands. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for never forgetting me. Even when I feel alone, remind me that I'm held. Help me to trust your timing. Even when it tests me, help me to believe you're working, even when I can't see it. Forgive me for the times I doubted your heart. Teach me to rest in your love, to find peace in your presence, and to walk by faith, not by sight. You are faithful even when my hope feels fragile. Today I choose to believe that I am not forgotten. I am yours. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining me for day 29 of the 100 Days of Faith Challenge. If this message reassured your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else who needs that same comfort. I'll see you tomorrow for day 30. Until then, stay rooted in truth, stay connected to God's love, and as always, stay blessed.